Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to Love and Abuse. I am so glad that you are here. Just so you know that all the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. All right, this is going to be sort of a rapid-fire show. I'm going to read you a few messages that I received and do my best to answer them quickly. I get a lot of messages, and if you have sent me a message even months ago, I do have it. I do have it in my inbox. It's just that I get a lot of them, and I just can't get to all of them. And I do try to cover every subject that people ask me about. And sometimes they're repeat questions, and I highly recommend you go to loveandabuse.com and look for those subject matters that you would like to hear me talk about, because I may have covered it. But always, if you have a question or something that you haven't heard me talk about that you would like to hear me talk about, you can contact me through loveandabuse.com. And I'm just going to get started on these messages. They're really quick, just bullet questions that I've written down here from people that have written to me over the years. And the first one is, what do you do with the silent treatment? And I think I've answered this before, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick answer. What do you do with the silent treatment? Do you let it go? Do you move on with your life? Do you just ignore them? Let me just explain the silent treatment just in case you haven't heard me talk about it before. There are two types. There is the emotionally abusive silent treatment, which is when you withhold love and attention and you ignore or mope around and you are quiet, you are silent, and you don't let the other person know where you are inside your head. You just want them to feel maybe alone, disconnected. It's almost like a punishment. So that's why it's emotionally abusive to do that type of silent treatment. Then there's the other type of silent treatment, which is more of a self-protection or processing time. Sometimes you get treated in a certain way, or somebody says something and you're not sure how to handle it. So you want to take some time to yourself and process it. And this is a self-protective behavior so that you can reflect, you can ponder, and it isn't meant as a punishment. This is the difference. The emotionally abusive silent treatment is meant as a punishment. The non-emotionally abusive silent treatment, which it really isn't fair to call it the silent treatment, it's more of processing time, like give me some time, give me some space, give me some time alone so I can just think things through. That is you nurturing yourself, being compassionate for yourself, taking the time to ponder and reflect so that you can figure it out. Sometimes you have to take time to figure stuff out. So those are the two main types of silent treatment. There are probably others, but those are the main two that I really consider and work with. The question is, what do you do with it? Like this person wrote an email, and like I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but she said, my partner will go into the silent treatment sometimes for 3 days, sometimes for longer. And I'm the only one that actually breaks him out of it, because when I go up to him and I say, okay, let's talk about this, you've been silent for so long, he goes off on me and says, see, this is why I don't want to talk to you, because you have this reaction. So I stay silent. I'm afraid to share anything with you. I would say that his silent treatment in this context is punishing. In fact, I would say it is not only punishing, it is done so in a way where he sets the person up to fail. So he becomes silent. He knows that his partner is going to come to him eventually, and when that person does, he gets angry. And now he has an excuse to get angry. And this is where somebody might use certain behaviors to make you feel bad, to blame you, and as an excuse to be emotionally abusive. So we have to be careful when somebody does something like this and then gets upset at you for trying to break the ice, trying to reconnect. In this case, he used the silent treatment knowing that it would eventually lead to this other person breaking the silence, and then he self-justified acting badly. Then made his partner feel bad and not know what to do and feel confused. So in this case, yes, I would say that the silent treatment is part of an emotionally abusive pattern that gets repeated. And if you've listened to my other shows, and I've talked about this in both The Overwhelmed Brain and this show, Love and Abuse, you've heard me talk about the concept that your response and your reaction facilitates their response and their reaction. So if you keep getting responses you don't like, you need to change your responses or your reactions. In this case, this person broke the silence every time by trying to reconnect, by trying to get into a conversation, by trying to be close again. And that worked against her, I think it was a her, every time. Because every time she approached him and said, okay, you've been in this space a while. Can you talk to me a little bit? Can you tell me what's going on? And he just blows up. Or maybe she gets upset and says, it's been 3 days. When are you coming back? And he says, see, this is why I never tell you anything, because you always get mad at me. It's a setup. Watch out for the setups. Watch out for the setups, because these things will get you every time. You think you're doing the right thing, and in a normal relationship, you probably are, but you have to watch out for the setup. You know it's a setup if you get the same unfavorable response every time. That's how you know it's a setup. I mean, they may not know it's a setup. They may not know they're doing it. They just know they get their way, or they keep their power and you lose your power. And that keeps them in a place that makes them feel better where you feel bad. And sometimes people feel better because you feel bad. I hate to say that, but that's sometimes what happens with certain people. So we have to be really careful about setting ourselves up to fail when it comes to emotional abuse and making sure that we don't get entrapped. We don't want to get into that space. So I want to answer this question really quick. She said, what do you do with a silent treatment? Do you let it go and move on with your life? Do you address it? Do you approach the other person? What if they're always getting mad when you do that? My take on the silent treatment, when somebody does it to punish you in some way, to make you feel bad, to make you feel guilty, is to do exactly what a good salesperson would do. A little strange, but I'm going to tell you, a good salesperson will come up to you in a store and they'll say, hey, my name's Paul. If you need anything, I'll be right over there. Just let me know. When a good salesperson does that, you know it's a good salesperson because they're not pressuring you, they're not hassling you, they're not putting you on the spot. They're allowing you to be where you are if you're just browsing, or if you have a question, they're right there in front of you and you can ask that question right then and there. But what they're doing is they're offering help with no strings attached. That's it. When someone is in a silent treatment that seems to be punishing you, you offer them an ear with no strings attached, in the sense where you might go up and say, hey, I know you're in a space right now and I completely understand. I want to give you that space. If you need me, just let me know. Otherwise, I will leave you alone as long as you need. And then you walk away. Now, if they want to talk, great. You can have a conversation. Hopefully it's a productive conversation, but if they want to talk, great. If not, you move on. You go away. You've served the ball onto their side of the court. Now they have the ball. And you go back to your side and you can do whatever you want. You are ready to talk when they're ready to talk. And if they don't want to talk for 3 days, that's where they are. That's where they are. That's where they need to be. And if that's where they need to be, so be it. We just leave them there. Now, I know there's a limit. There's going to be a limit. What is your limit? 3 days? I think 3 days is ridiculous, quite honestly. Even for processing, I don't think processing is ridiculous. I just think if it takes you 3 days of silence without talking to someone, there's something else going on there. Even if you're processing and you can't figure things out, it's the non-punishing type of silent treatment. Just to say, hey, look, I'm still trying to figure things out. please give me some more time, would be, I think, a suitable comment to make. But to be silent for days and days without talking, I know it happens. I've seen it happen. I've probably done it in my past, but it needs to be addressed in some way. So the person doing the silent treatment, if they need more time, I believe they should tell the other person, I just need more time. And the other person should acknowledge it and say, you got it. No problem. But if it's emotionally abusive silent treatment, they're probably not going to say, I need more time. They probably won't. They probably have an agenda. They want to punish. They want to make you feel bad by not talking to you. It's not giving you any attention. It's not giving you any love. It's not showing that you're important to them, and it makes you feel lonely, and that is the punishing part. So it's unlikely that when someone's being emotionally abusive, they're going to say something like, hey, I just need more time. I've got a lot going on in my mind, so I'm sorry, just give me that time. But it could happen. At least if it does happen, they've acknowledged you, and there may be a mix going on. Maybe they are processing, and maybe they do want you to feel bad. That mix can happen. But I do like the good salesman approach where you just say, hey, look, I know you're in a space right now, and I'll give you that space. Just let me know if you need me. If it goes on for too long, day 2, day 3, day 4, I still think it's okay to say, hey, it's been longer than normal, so I just want to let you know I'm still here if you want to talk. I know you're still processing things, even though they may or may not be processing things. They may be using it as a punishment. But you say this. You give them the benefit of the doubt and say, I know you may be processing things, and I'm still here if you need me. I just want to let you know. And then walk away again. Someone punishing you with a silent treatment, it's not going to last as long as that, typically. It could, and I'm sure it does, but typically it does not. Typically there's more going on, and if it goes several more days after that, whatever your limit is, you're eventually going to say, okay, you've been this way for this number of days, and I understand that you may not want to share anything with me, but I want to find out where this is going. How much more time do you need? And no matter what you say, in this person's case, she might say that to him, and he might say, see, you don't give me enough time, and now you're getting angry with me. He might do that. And that might actually reveal that he was just waiting for her to approach him in that respect so that he could lose it on her and then blame her. And if that's the case, then I would advise her to ask, well, how many days should I wait? How long do you want this to go on where we're not communicating at all? Because I will certainly follow your lead, but you got to let me know so I'm not in the dark the whole time. Do you need a month? Do you need 6 months? I mean, be straight with me. That kind of conversation may need to happen, but I think the conversations need to happen. If you're in that situation where somebody's always using the silent treatment on you as a punishment and they wait sometimes days, then a conversation needs to take place regardless of how hard it is. So I'm going to leave that there. That was the first question, and I hope that is helpful to anyone that might be dealing with that. The second question I have is something I've also, I think, addressed before. Is there any coming back from the abuse after it has occurred? So you've been in an abusive relationship, and you've gone maybe through a breakup, or maybe if it's not romantic, you've had a fight about it, or you just separated for a while, and you haven't been dealing with each other, but maybe there's an opportunity to reconcile, and maybe somebody has changed, maybe somebody has healed, maybe things are different now. There's always a chance. There's always a chance for reconciliation of some sort. But it always has to involve one or both people healing in some way. And that doesn't mean they read a book and then the next day they're fine. It means they read a book and then they tested and challenged themselves. In fact, I just wrote this in a newsletter for Healed Being, the program for emotionally abusive people that want to change. I wrote this I think in one of the newsletters or one of the Q&As, where it's important that after an emotionally abusive relationship, when changes take place, when the emotional abuser heals or says they've healed, they need to test themselves. They need to challenge themselves. In fact, you need to challenge them too. That means that you rub salt in the old wounds. That means you activate the triggers that used to cause them to be abusive. For example, if they became passive aggressive every time you left a dish on the table, and they said they've done a lot of healing and they're not going to be abusive anymore, you may have to leave a dish on the table to find out if it affects them anymore. You might have to leave it on for 3 days. You might have to leave it there for a while just to find out. And you will find out. You have to test this stuff. You have to figure out if they really are healing or have healed like they said they have. A good analogy for this is something called future pacing in hypnosis. When you go to a hypnotherapist, for example, and you want to stop a bad habit, what they'll do is after some of the hypnosis, they will do this future pacing exercise, which they put you in scenarios in your mind in the future. So let's just say that you want to stop smoking and you loved to smoke outside on the bench at work. That was your break time. So what they'll do is they will say, imagine you're at work right now and you just got off the phone with an angry person, and normally you would have gone outside to smoke so you can feel better. When you think about that right now, where do you go with that? What do you want to do? If the hypnosis worked, you'll say something other than smoking, and you'll mean it. You'll say, well, normally I would have smoked, but this time I think I'm just going to breathe. I think I'm going to close my eyes and maybe put my headphones on and listen to some soft music. I think that's what I'll do. And what they're doing is challenging you with the old triggers that cause you to want to smoke in this example, so that when you face those triggers again, you'll know what you're going to do. That's what future pacing is in hypnosis. This is exactly the same thing, except in real time, where an emotionally abusive person says, look, I've done a lot of growing, I've done a lot of changing, I've done a lot of healing, and I feel really good, and I feel so bad that I hurt you, and I'm so sorry that I hurt you, and I never want to do that again. Please give me another chance. I promise you I have changed. I promise I feel so different now, and I'm never going to act that way again. All right, if you want to give them a chance, you have to test and challenge them. That doesn't mean you purposefully try to shove everything in their face. You just do the normal things that you did before, and don't be afraid to do them. Don't be afraid of the repercussions so much that you don't do them, because if you don't do them, you'll never challenge them. It won't be a challenge for them. So if you leave that dish on the table and they see that dish and they say something about that dish, and you can feel a little passive aggressiveness or some sort of jab, I don't think they're healed yet. I don't think they've reached that point, because someone who is healed is not going to see that dish the same way. They're going to act different. So this is my answer to this person who wrote, is there any returning from emotional abuse? Yes, but it often requires a lot of healing on both sides, because both sides need to get into a better space in their head where the victim isn't so foggy and confused anymore, and the abuser understands that their behavior is harmful and it isn't the other person's fault, it's their own fault, because they need to heal. I shouldn't even use the word fault, but it's their responsibility to heal. It's their responsibility to change. Because my belief about relationships is always the following. If you don't like someone else's behavior, don't be emotionally abusive toward them. Be self-compassionate and do the right thing for you. Now, there's a million ways to read into that, but the way I look at it is how I looked at my marriage. After I healed from being emotionally abusive in my marriage, I finally decided to take responsibility for the way I felt about anything she did that triggered me. I took responsibility for how I felt about her behavior that triggered me. And that's so different than me blaming her for behavior I didn't like. That's just two different ends of the pendulum swing. Before, I was blaming her and letting her know that she was wrong and she needed to change. And if she didn't change, it was her fault that our relationship was terrible. That was before. The after was me telling myself, if she doesn't change and I have a problem with it, It's my problem, not hers. If she's living her life the way she wants to or she can't help, and I have a problem with that, that's my problem, not hers. And this is when I started focusing on myself and taking responsibility for my decision to stay with someone and not give them grief about who they are. In other words, I had to be accepting of this person no matter how they showed up. Of course, you can say, hey, look, when you do that, it really bothers me. Can we talk about this? You can have conversations like that. But if they finally say, look, I can't change, this is who I am, then it comes back to you. It comes back to you, the person who is choosing to be with the person who either won't change or can't change. And that means you have to take responsibility for your decision to be with that person or be around that person. It would be like me telling my stepfather, hey, look, stop drinking or I won't call you anymore. And he might say, look, I can't stop drinking. And if we lived together, I would say, well, you need to stop drinking because I don't like it. And it's going to hurt our relationship. And if he said, well, I'll try, but I don't know if I can. And, he's an alcoholic and he has not sought any treatment for this. So I know for a fact, unless something big changes, he's going to continue drinking. But here I am giving him grief about his drinking when I know that he can't or won't seek help to stop. And because of that, should I blame him for hurting me by continuing to drink, or should I look to myself and ask myself, is it my responsibility to make the choice of staying in this situation or not? And the latter is true. I'm making the choice to stay in a relationship like this that is hurtful to me. This is kind of a loose example because I don't live with my stepfather. I don't talk to my stepfather. He is out of my life. But if he was still in my life and I had a problem with his drinking, would his drinking be my problem, or would my choice to be around him while he drinks be my problem? Because if I focus on the latter of my choice, then I have control over my exposure to bad behavior. Because when he drinks, he's not on good behavior. So today I would decide to take responsibility for my choice to be around that person, which means all my focus needs to be on me, not them. And in emotionally abusive relationships, the focus is typically on the other person. When are you going to change? Why don't you change? Why are you doing this to me? When our focus is on the other person, we're not really listening to ourselves. And that's where we need to focus. Because if I'm in a situation with my alcoholic stepfather and I focus on myself, I'm going to ask myself, do I want to continue exposing myself to this? Because if the answer is no, then I need to leave it. And I need to leave him be. I may not accept his behavior. I may not like it. I may completely reject it. But should I give him grief for that? Or should I refocus my energy onto me and ask myself, what do I need to do to be away from that? So that's my philosophy about relationships, is when you're in one, if someone can't or won't change, it's time to stop focusing on wanting them to change and start focusing on what you need to do for you and what you're exposing yourself to and what you should do next. Because if things don't change, you kind of have to accept that's the way it's going to be from this point on. So is there any coming back from the abuse? Yes, but test. Test, challenge, evoke those old triggers, make sure that they have disappeared. Or if they haven't disappeared, a response from them might be, oh, this used to trigger me and I have some feelings about it and I'd like to talk about it. That could be a productive conversation too. Just depends on where they are and how far they've come and if you're willing and open to talk about it. So there's number 2. I'm going to go through this next one really quick. I don't think it's so much a question, but I like the inspirational stuff too. This person wrote, thank you for this site and this info. I am a verbal abuser and I'm doing heavy counseling for CPTSD. I think it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know my boundaries well and I project my fears and brokenness on my wife. My wife and I are separated and talk and pray daily. We are currently co-parenting. I need resources to see exactly what verbal abuse looks like and what controlling actions look like, walking out of the room, not talking, etc. I feel I can be doing more as I heal. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, so it wasn't so much a question, but I think they're implying that they're looking for resources, and they're in the right place. This is the Love and Abuse podcast, and of course I talked about Healed Being over at healedbeing.com. Anyone that's verbally, psychologically, mentally, emotionally abusive will find some excellent life-changing lessons at healedbeing.com. I do have a program for the emotionally abusive person that wants to change. But I wanted to read this because one of the implied questions, which is, I need resources to see exactly what verbal abuse looks like and what control looks like. This is something that I've broken down into probably one simple question. And that question is my intention to make them feel bad? That's it. Is my intention to make the other person feel bad? You can ask this question of yourself whenever you're about to do something or say something. I remember I started asking myself this question when I was married. Whenever a thought would come to mind and I was about to say something, I would interrupt my thought and ask myself, is what I'm about to say an effort to make her feel bad? And I would get the yes answer, and I hated it. I really hated that I got the yes answer. Not because I knew it was bad behavior, but because I really wanted to make her feel bad. I hate to admit it, but there was a part of me that wanted to make her feel bad because I believed that making someone feel bad was a way to make them change. Emotional abuse is wanting someone to change, to conform to your standards. So this is what I was trying to do in my relationship and failed miserably in all my relationships. Whenever I tried to control someone or make them conform to my standards and make them feel bad for not conforming to my standards, the relationship disintegrated day by day by day until the relationship died. And when it died, that was it. I didn't have the relationship anymore. So all of my efforts, like I said before, everything I was doing wasn't working. It was taking me in the wrong direction. I was always focused on them, always focused on how they showed up, how they should be, and never focused on myself and what this person said about boundaries. I didn't know my own boundaries then. I didn't know what boundaries were. Boundaries are what you will and won't accept in your life. And when you choose to honor your boundaries, and someone's in your life that is a violation of those boundaries or even a violation of your values, and you stay with them and you complain about them and you continue to stay with them and complain about them, then you are essentially violating your own values and boundaries. And then you blame them for doing that to you. I'm not saying you, but some people do this. Some people will do this. I used to do this. I used to violate my own boundaries by being with someone whose values did not match mine. And instead of putting myself on the spot and telling myself, hey, they're not in alignment with your values, so what are you going to do about it? Instead of saying that, I instead focused on them changing for me, instead of me either changing my values or getting out of the situation. There's a whole story behind that I won't get into right now, but I've talked about that before, where there's a point in a relationship where you have to decide, is this really what I want in my life? And for me, in my marriage, I said, no, it's not, which is what caused me to change. I didn't leave, I changed. I didn't force myself to change. I finally realized that my standards were just way too high. It finally hit me that I was forcing my standards and my values onto other people, and that was causing the love to disintegrate. And that's what happened over and over again. Again, huge backstory, but if you've listened to this show enough, you've probably heard it. So with the person who wrote, what does abuse look like? It is often answered with the question, do I want them to feel bad? And another question you can ask yourself is, am I doing this to change who they are, regardless of how they feel about it? That's the second question. Am I doing this to change who they are, regardless of how they feel about it? That's an important question. If you say, well, if you think about it and you say, well, yeah, I want them to change, but what they're doing is bad, they should change, then you might be trying to control them. I'm not saying it's always emotional abuse, but you might be trying to control them. If you answer the question, yes, I do want them to change regardless of how they feel about it because it hurts me, that could be your answer. It's still trying to control them. So these are important questions you can ask yourself when you don't know if there's emotional abuse or control. Even manipulation is a form of control, and it's important to understand where you're coming from just in case you feel like maybe there's something that needs to change in you. And I'm speaking mostly to the people that might be thinking they're controlling or emotionally abusive or have been told they're controlling or emotionally abusive, because when you ask that question of yourself, you may say, no, I don't want them to change. I just want them to stop hurting me. And that might be another method of control. It may not be emotional abuse. It's from the victim's perspective. But yes, you want people to stop hurting you. But again, it comes back to what do you want for yourself and what do you continue exposing yourself to? So these are important questions to answer. And I'm not saying that you have to leave immediately as soon as you realize you're exposing yourself to toxic behavior. I'm just saying that maybe that would require a discussion. Maybe that is something to bring up. Hey, look, I keep exposing myself to this toxic behavior of yours, and I don't know if I can do it anymore. I just don't know. I think that's a productive conversation. They may not find it productive, but if you go up to them and say, look, I can't expose myself to this toxic behavior, or I don't want to be around you when you insult me or hurt me or joke about me or embarrass me. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to be around that anymore. That could be a very productive conversation. But where do you go with it? What if they say, okay, well, that's too bad. I'm not going to change. Now you have some bigger decisions to make because now you know who you're dealing with and now you know it's not going to change. And that's tough. I understand. That's very tough. But when you find out who someone is and you know that they're not going to change, then complaining to them about it may do absolutely nothing. And so you may want to save your energy for something else. I'm just going to read you a big thank you to end the show here. A person wrote, I just want to thank you for both of your podcasts. I'm going through a breakup of a long-term relationship, and many episodes of Love and Abuse have described what I'm going through so closely, it was like a huge weight lifted. It allowed me to look above the clouds and see things for what they were. Did it make it easier? Not really, but I felt like I could finally see clearly and take some of the emotion out of it. For the first time, I was able to identify the cycle and truly understand that it's not my fault and nothing I can fix. This is what gave me the strength to move forward with the ending of the relationship, so I don't spend the next 5 years like I spent the last 5. I really never thought I'd get here, and now that I am, I'm so grateful. I'm listening to the overwhelmed brain as well, and it's just like what I've always needed to hear. I can't express it enough, so I'll just say thank you 1,000 times. I feel so lucky to have found you. Please know that you're doing such a wonderful thing. Oh, I just wanted to read that to show you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I want to thank this person who wrote that. I don't read these things to pat myself on the back or prove myself to you or anything like that. I'm hoping that inspirational messages like this hit you somewhere inside you. I want them to hit you somewhere inside you so that you know that even in the worst situations, there are people that have gotten out of them. And this is something I like to repeat over and over again. When you're in the middle of an emotionally abusive relationship, you are foggy. You are confused often. You just can't think straight. You can't trust yourself. This is all by design. Unfortunately, this is all by design from the emotional abuse. Emotional abuse creates the fog. It creates the mistrust in yourself. It creates an environment where you feel like you can't do it without the other person often. And so if you're in this space and you're not sure and you are considering leaving the relationship, there's always 2 things I suggest. If you're going to leave a relationship or disconnect with somebody, start at minimum with a temporary separation. So you may not want to do the full Monty. You may not want to just jump out head first and get the heck away. You may, I don't know, but sometimes people need to dip their toe in the water and find out if it's okay to swim, if it's not too cold. So you want to gradually go into a different space. You might have to separate for a while, but the separation is so helpful because it starts to lift the fog so you can start to think clearly. And when you can think clearly, or at least clearer, you can make better decisions. So I always suggest at least a temporary separation, if possible. Or if you're in a worse situation, yes, you might have to get out, and that's what you might need to do. And the second thing I like to suggest is you have to be really careful when the emotionally abusive person says, I've changed, I've healed, I'll never do that again. I've said this myself. A long time ago, I said this myself because I really believed it. This is what happens with people with addictions, unfortunately, is that they'll say something that they really believe when they're not under the influence. And then when they're under the influence, whatever they said goes out the window. I'm not saying everyone with an addiction does this. I'm just saying it's common. For example, the alcoholic says, you know what, I'll never hurt you again. I'm so sorry. I'll never drink again. Until they drink again. They believe it when they say it. But then the urge is so strong. Whatever it is, that chemical dependency or the emotions are too strong to deal with, so they take a drink, and now they're in that space and they can't honor the words that they spoke earlier. They're in a completely different space now. They may have promised it and meant it at the time, but then when they're under the influence, they're in that completely different space and it just goes out the window. This is very similar, at least what I experienced when I was emotionally abusive. I really believed I would never do it again. I believed it. I told myself because I said I didn't want to lose the relationship, and that was my accountability. If I do this again, I'd lose the relationship. But I did it again because the emotional triggers were still there. I had not done the healing I needed to do. I still had some old stuff that I had to deal with that was still in there because it made up who I was. This was me at a core level, which is why I tell people in my Healed Being program that in order to heal, you need to change who you are. And that isn't necessarily a quick decision that you just suddenly change, because it might be deep-rooted. Who you are is deep-rooted. It's who you've been all your life. At least most of your life when you started acting this way. And in order to heal and show someone else that you're healing, they have to look at you as if they're surprised about who you turned into. What? Who are you? The old you would never show up like this. I don't even know who you are. But that would be a good thing. Because if they can't recognize the old you, that might mean you're actually changing. And that might be what they need to see. But don't just make a conscious decision to not do the behavior and not deal with what you need to heal inside of you. If you're the emotionally abusive person, you don't want to do that because that's going to wear off pretty quickly. You're going to get into that settling point where you're comfortable again, and then your real self starts to show up again. And if you have unhealed, unresolved emotional stuff from the past still in there, and it's causing you to be emotionally abusive, it's going to come out again. This is why I tell the victims of emotional abuse to trigger you, to challenge you, to put you to the test, because they need to know for sure that you've changed. And the real world scenarios bring it out in people. This was quite a content-packed show. I hope you got something from it. Thank you so much for joining me. Share this with others that might benefit. Head over to Love and Abuse, where I offer the MEAN workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook gives you your MEAN score, which helps you pinpoint the specific hurtful behaviors you're experiencing. It is created to help you make the next best decision for you and those you love. Sometimes it's hard to make decisions without knowing what's true and what isn't. The workbook helps you determine what's true. It also answers the question of why you leave so many interactions feeling bad. Let it help you put into words what you're experiencing. Reach clarity over at loveandabuse.com. And for those who believe they are the emotionally abusive person and want to change that behavior, head over to healedbeing.com and start the Healed Being program. Take the journey that will help you heal and stop the behavior that may be destroying your relationships. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. Thank you again for joining me today. We'll talk again soon.